Well, thanks very much, Breach, for the introduction, and I suppose I should also congratulate Joe Mulholland. This is it's an extraordinary feat. There was a hiss when I was a kid, 101 trombones made the hit parade, and I feel I'm the 101st trombone that's come into this hall to try and catch your attention, and others, as have been before me, are much more melodic, but I'll do the best I can. When I got this topic to discuss, I've started to use Facebook, as many of you probably have, and I stuck this on Facebook. I've been asked to do this topic, and the first response I got, "Are you totally out of touch as a politician?" Rather than reflect the ambitions and the ideals of the founders of the state, why not reflect the ideals and ambitions of the citizens of today? And I think that was set me thinking, and even though I had, before I got this very insightful email, had spent a couple of days reading Connolly, reading Tom Johnson, reading Arthur Griffith, and I've decided that a lot of my reading was not really going to help me. Because the truth is, of course, that there was enormous diversity among those who advocated a republic. And, you know, it was really the common quest for independence that papered over their differences for a period. And the problems now are so different from the problems that they faced. They had a fairly naive belief in ourselves alone, protectionism. Nationalism was their banking policy, it was their education policy, it was their economic policy, it was their foreign policy. It was a very simple policy, really. But unfortunately, the world has changed. But I think what we can learn from our founders, and it's the lesson that I believe we've forgotten, and that is that at the heart of politics, it is about the self-determination of the Irish people. And that's what we have forgotten. We have forgotten about the citizen in our republic. Citizens should be at the heart of the republic that we seek to build, and we simply failed to do that. Like many people look at the catastrophe that has occurred to us, and some people say, well, it was a quake way out in the ocean that created this tsunami that swept in these wonderfully sustainable policies that the government was pursuing. In my belief, that's totally wrong. The fault lines in our system that brought around the earthquake that we have happened were here at home. They were in institutions that the citizen was led to believe would protect it, protect the citizen, and they simply failed. And they failed, in my belief, because the essence of the Republican message, which is about power, 1, being responsibly exercised, 2, being properly accountable, and 3, being in the interests of the citizen, that is every citizen, those values did not inspire the institutions that were here in Ireland. And there are 4 of them that I would single out: politics, the public service, the regulatory system, and the system of social partnership. They did not sufficiently reflect those values, and those fault lines proved fatal, especially when they interacted. We have had in politics an overweening executive which broke loose from the oversight of Parliament, which was never particularly effective, but which has become, in my view, virtually ineffective in its oversight of power and the exercise of power in this state. Budgetary scrutiny is almost non-existent. Many agencies are now out of reach of the accountability. As we created more and more agencies, they're out of reach of the accountability of Parliament. Whips and guillotines hammer people into line. Decisions by all party committees are never acted upon. There is no proper citizen participation in the way we reach our decisions. So much is wrong about the parliamentary system that I think in many of us in politics we've been reduced to the theatre of looking for the smartest soundbite instead of doing the hard work of a parliament to hold people to account, and particularly to hold government to account. Equally, our public service. We have developed a rigid public service that failed to adapt with the changing times. It's closed in its recruitment of 81 senior public servants. Not one was recruited from outside the civil service. Not one. There was in fact one, but that person was someone who left and came back in. It hides behind ministerial responsibility to protect our public service from proper accountability. It doesn't engage properly with the users of public service. It still has a hierarchical, centralised, the centre knows best model. One size fits all. That's what's imposed in too many areas of our public service. And it simply doesn't work and doesn't reflect the sort of system that we need. We have allowed both, as a public service that ought to have valued and harnessed the talent that it had. And it does attract the most talented people. But we have allowed it to become one that is not performing to high professional standards. Look at the strategy statements that it produced. It produced a strategy statement on climate change, on health, on decentralisation. And the list could go on. And every one of them failed. And yet no one was ever held accountable. Why is there not a system that if you set a strategy, you set aside a budget, you make someone responsible, and if they fail, there is an inquest and consequences follow? We have not delivered that in our public service. And that means that we don't have a public service that genuinely serves the interests of the citizens. It's too much a system favouring those who are already inside. And similarly, we developed a regulatory culture that was simply succumb to what the economists call regulatory capture. It was fragmented in its structure. It didn't take its enforcement powers seriously. As we saw from the central bank, it regarded a prosecution of an individual within the banking system as bad news because it might damage the reputation of that system, instead of looking at the fact that these actions were exposing the citizen to enormous risk. The cosy circle had developed where people were totally soaked in to trying to protect this structure instead of making it openly and properly accountable and operated in the interests of the citizen. Again, the regulatory system failed. And equally, our social partnership failed us. Yes, it was a huge, valuable asset in the crisis of the 1980s. But as that crisis passed, it outlived its usefulness. It became a producer-dominated system that protected rip-off within the private sector, that slowed down reform within the public sector, that blunted political accountability because governments could cast the mantle of partnership around them and squeeze out opposition voices, whether it was within Parliament or indeed many opposition voices who clamoured to say our system was unsustainable, and yet every one of them was treated with contempt. Indeed, it was at a social partnership gathering that the Taoiseach famously said that those who are criticising our model should go and commit suicide. We had become too closed in the way we thought, and the citizens' interest was not at the heart of our system. These structures had become too soft, too interested in the insider's interest rather than the outsider. And that, of course, has not only brought this catastrophic problem, but now as we try to rebuild, the issue for us is, are we going to try and nurse along those problems of the past, or are we genuinely going to try and reinvent a new future? And that really is the debate that I believe it has to be taken on at this stage. Because what's happened in this country in the last 2.5 years is catastrophic for young people in this country. They are the victims of this crisis. Young people who are in negative equity, young people who have lost their jobs or who have no prospect. A little known figure, but one that I think is very telling. Of the jobs that have been lost in the last 2 years, and there are 250,000 of them, 90% of those jobs have been lost by people under the age of 30. Now, those are the people who ought to be the building blocks of the new republic, the republic that we all want to see. These are the young, talented, the educated people. Yet we are seeing their interests being ground down by the recession. And we do have choices. I mean, the choice can be put very simply in one way. The economy has shrunk by 25%. We have a choice. Either all of us take a 25% cut, or some people, and it's predominantly the young people, will take a 100% cut because they will have no job. They will have no prospects. They will have closed doors. They will have emigration. And we do have to face up to that hard challenge as a community. And we have to change the institutions so that we do not make the same mistake again. A fatal mistake that has been made in many countries that experience earthquakes is to build over the same fault lines again, using the same designs, indeed using the same architects, and that's the mistake we're making here. And I don't refer simply to the political fact that those who were in government at the time of the earthquake are now, if you like, trying to design the solution. Though that, in my view, is part of the problem, because they even still face to recognise that they presided over and were culpable for huge failings. But I refer to the fact that some of the policies that are being adopted are simply not designed to favour the future as against the past. The system of banking is going to be about nursing along the failed loans of the past. That's what NAMA and recapitalisation is about. Nursing along the failed loans of the past, the failed banks of the past, to be kept open. While people with bankable ideas that could provide jobs for the future are starved of credit. That's the banking policy. It's favouring the past instead of the future. We're cutting frontline entitlements to people. Instead of reforming the huge and streamlining the huge system of bureaucracy, of multiple agencies, of multiple bodies doing the same processes in duplicated ways, that's the easy option, is to cut the frontline entitlements. The hard thing, but the thing that builds for the future, is to reform those structures, those inefficient ways of doing things. And that has not yet been faced up to. We're slashing our investment programmes, even though we know, and the National Competitiveness Council, whose chairman is here today, would tell us, we are worst now for waste, we're worst for broadband, we're one of the worst for electricity, and yet we're going to starve investment in these sectors, these arteries of economic growth for the future. That is so short-sighted. It is again saying, let's do the thing that's easy, about battening down the hatches of the past, not favouring the interests of the future. They're cutting welfare entitlements, but they're not reforming the traps that mean people, when they slip into the welfare system, can't get out. So we really have to take a very hard look at the sort of strategies we're following. Too much of what is being done now is, it is a prisoner of the thinking of the past. It's about, let's batten down the hatches, pull up the ladder, and let's try and get through this storm, ride out the storm. The trouble is that the outsiders who are still up on deck, they're the young people with negative equity, the young people who can't get jobs. And the storm is going to sweep them away, while those who are comfortable on the inside have pulled up the hatches behind them. So we do have really hard choices. And I think we have to remember, this is not a question that we can simply go back to where we were. The world has changed, and a lot of people talk about, why don't we have a stimulus? Leave aside the fact that our bankers wouldn't fund a stimulus package. It's not a stimulus. I think as the former chief executive or chairman of Intel said, you can stimulate your way back to stability. You can only reinvent your way back to prosperity. And that's what we have to do. We have to reinvent ourselves as a country. The world has changed. There are now 3 billion extra capitalists competing for the same space that we are. We are no longer, the exciting prospect for American companies. We can't rely anymore on foreign investment to boost employment. We have to rely on our own ingenuity, our own innovation, and our own people to create the employment opportunities and the jobs of the future. And we have to bring that and recognise that in our thinking. So this is a time, in my belief, there's a new national question, if you like, and that is, how do we carve out an independent strategy that favours and supports the interests of our citizens in this very changed global environment? A more competitive one where we don't have the same policy instruments we once had, because we are now part of the Eurozone. We have to design a strategy that faces that. And it is about being brave and courageous and looking afresh. But the first thing that has to change, in my belief, is we have to recognise that the existing social contract, which is at the heart of any political system, that social contract between the government and the citizen, that is shattered in Ireland. People have lost trust in the political system. They've lost trust in the public service. They've lost trust in partnership. They've lost trust in the regulatory system. And that has to be repaired. And it won't be repaired simply by saying, we're going to reform these things. People will want to see that politicians are willing to lead by example in the way they do things, that there is concrete changes that people can believe in. There needs to be a fundamental realignment in these institutions that drive our state, to make them not favour the insider as they now do, but to favour the citizen. We have to hardwire that into the institutions in politics and in the public service in a new way,
that we haven't done before. And people will want to see hard, concrete changes to do that. We need to... Citizens face, in my view, a very different type of challenge than they used to in the past. In the past, if you like, the model of what the state was doing, it was about, trying to do away with want, with disease, with ignorance, with squalor, with idleness. They were the big, icons of what the welfare state was to deliver for people. But people have moved on. Their life has become much more open to different risks. And we now need to shape a social contract, if you like, that helps people to manage the new sort of risks in their lives. And those are going to be much more, they're about positive things in their lives. They're not about disease, they're about health. They're not about want, they're about opportunity. They're not about ignorance, they're about knowledge and the capacity to use it. They're not about squalor, they're about sustainability and how we're going to create a community and a planet that's sustainable. They're not about idleness, they're about employability and the capacity to be employed for your life. Those are the sort of policies that have to inspire a new republic that serves the interests of citizens that have been failed by the existing system. And I think that it means an entirely different relationship with the citizen in all those institutions. We can't have a monolithic state trying to deliver, a one-size-fits-all to citizens. Public services are not something that are done to people. Public services are something that should be enabling people to fulfill their potential. And that's changed mindset that we have to get into our public services and into our politics. That is about helping people to shape their own lives. And that's so important. It's not only about giving them voice and choice, but the truth is that many of the problems, the most intractable problems that we face as a community, are as much about people's choices of lifestyle as about, the state telling them what to do. Climate change will only be solved by people changing their lifestyle. Drug abuse and other abuse of substance will be only changed by people changing their lifestyle. Families will only stick together by people changing the way they try to construct and support their families. So, to be successful as a society, public service has to enlist and engage the citizen, and we failed dismally, in my view, to do that. So, reform is absolutely necessary in those core institutions to deliver a new, fairer agenda that people can have faith in. People are not going to accept a journey with politics and with politicians if they believe that it's only going to put back into the saddle the people whose greed and extravagance brought our country to ruin. So they will have to see that there is something different about the way we structure and run our society. And I think, for starters, in politics, Parliament is going to have to be lean, it's going to have to be fit, it's going to have to have real authority and act as referee for the citizen. And I'd suggest a few ways in which that can be done. The government, in my view, has to change from pretending that it's running all the services to become a procurer on behalf of the citizen and hold people who are charged with the task of delivering the service, hold them to account, enter contracts with them independently at arm's length, so managers know what they're asked and expected to deliver, are given the freedom to do it and are held accountable. And government in turn, ministers in turn, are responsible for the policies that are chosen, the strategies are chosen. So if some daft strategy is adopted by a minister, it is his reputation who must be on the line, not some civil servant down the line made be held to account. And politicians can't, continue to hide behind, it was I always got the best of advice and acted upon it. That's not, ministers must take responsibility for shaping their strategy and take the consequences if it's a failure. We need to design a smart state, a state that's willing to be professionally judged by its outcomes and acts as an enabler of the citizen. It's a new way of thinking about the way we deliver service, and it's at the core of Fine Gael's notion of fair care, where it will be money following the patient will be at the heart of it. It will be the needs of the patient that will dictate what resources are got. And suddenly, hospitals won't find, like we found in Letterkenny just last year, that theatres closed down. Beds were closed, consultants stood idle because the budget had run out. Could you think of anything more stupid to run a system than to say in the month of November we close down healthcare, and that's regarded as efficiency and budget saving? We have to have a budget that says to that hospital in Letterkenny, if we can bring in more patients, treat them effectively, do better than any other hospital, we will become a success and we won't be curbed by this blind system of budgeting. We need also to recognise that regulators must become assertive and operate in a transparent way. As someone said, sunlight is the best disinfectant. But our regulatory system has been entirely in the dark. And I think that's a radical change that we must adopt. I went to Paloma Faith last week. I don't know whether many of you know Paloma Faith. She's a new sort of cabaret stroke jazz. But a song, do you want the truth or something beautiful? The trouble in politics over the last decade and or more is that people offered something beautiful and they just didn't have regard for the truth. And now is the time, I believe, for hard truths. These reforms that I want to see delivered and our party wants to see delivered, they're easy to say but they're hard to deliver. And I think it's not rhetoric that we need or sound bites or that citizens should be asked to endorse in an election. It's brave thinking, daring to imagine a better way of doing things. It's a mandate for concrete things that would make a difference. Things that people can say, yes, that will change something. And I believe that is the core challenge for we in politics who want to offer an alternative to the present government. And we have already, I believe, in Fine Gael, demonstrated the seriousness of our intent in documents like New Politics, New Era, Fair Care. These are radical documents. They're looking at an entirely different way, for example, at the state assets that we own. These are our assets that can be leveraged, as the economists say. We can borrow against these assets to build 21st century standards in electricity and water, in broadband. But we have to do that. We have to be willing to do two things that are not always going to be popular. We have to be willing to sell some of the old assets so that we can provide the funding base for it. And we have to run these utilities in a commercial way that is up to international best practice. And that is going to be disturbing for some people who are in some of these utilities. But that is a policy that we are committed to. It is a different way of running these institutions. It's a way of building strong arteries, economic arteries for the future that can make it possible to create employment in this country. And I think we need to go further on this agenda of practical changes that can really be implemented. I'd just like to offer a few changes that I believe are practical and should and can be implemented in a short time and a defined time. I believe we should replace the membership of every state board in an orderly manner within 6 months upon entering government. And we should give new members a clear letter of appointment as to what their duties are and their responsibilities, and they should be approved in their post by the Oireachtas. Now that would dramatically change the culture of the cosy circle, the crony, the hack that goes on these boards. It's simple and it's clear and it should be done. We should require that the next 2 vacancies in every government department be filled by someone who is from outside the civil service area. We should bring in people with real skills in relevant areas that can supplement the management team, the top management team of our departments that run their affairs too inward-looking and too much in silos. We should, in the competition area, shift the onus of proof from the regulator to those bodies who have sheltered behind anti-competitive practices. So it is they who must prove that those practices are to continue in the public interest, rather than having the competition authority write report after report about anti-competitive practices in professions and nothing ever get done. I believe we should also, just as the Cabinet meets every week to decide a strategy for government, Secretary-Generals, the government, those who are charged with delivery of government should equally meet every week to discuss how they are going to do that most cost effectively. building across the rigid silos that they typically occupy now and rarely talk to one another about their challenges. Let's make institutional changes that forces the pace on that. We should require every public service body, and that is the local Garda station, the local school, the local hospital, to publish performance standards for the citizens that it serves. No exemptions. Schools cannot say, information about the performance of children is too sensitive. Yes, you won't publish individual information, but you'll publish general information about how children are doing in our schools. We have to, as professionals in the public service, and I regard myself as a professional in the public service, be willing to stand over and be accountable for the standards we deliver. Yes, a child in Ballymun will find it more difficult than a child in Foxrock, but everyone knows that. But it is not tolerable that we understand that many children from low-income backgrounds are failed in our education system, and that information is never public knowledge. That's not acceptable in a republic that cherishes all of its citizens equally. We need to institute, in my view, citizens' hearings as an integral part of when we're framing new strategies, whether it be for climate change or otherwise. I believe we should also have for the Dáil a waiver of the freedom of information restrictions when it comes to the deliberation of government on important issues. For example, this week we are seeing by accident, if you like, that for the first time the papers surrounding the decision on the banking guarantee are being teased through by the Oireachtas. And the roof hasn't fallen in. Government hasn't collapsed. Public servants don't feel that this is a catastrophe. People are now, public servants and politicians alike, are stepping up to the plate and saying, maybe they're saying, we got it wrong. We were bamboozled by the banks. They overplayed their hand and we were suckered. And that's good for democracy. That's good for the service of citizenship in this country. Let's not have this stupid idea that the citizens are too immature to consider these important issues, and that politicians should be free from the prying eyes of citizens when they make those decisions. They're making those decisions on behalf of citizens. Citizens have the right, in my view, to
Richard, I'm just wondering, is it one page or 2 pages?
I beg your pardon. Have I overstayed? I thought everyone else was overstaying their welcome, so I took the liberty of doing the same myself, because I am actually watching my watch. No, just to bring it to a conclusion. I think a central lesson of this collapse is that politics matters, even in economic management. Economic management isn't about the experts in the central bank or the experts in the SRI or the experts in the Department of Finance. At the end of the day, they can only do so much unless, if there's bad politics, they will fail. We have to get our politics right, and politics in Ireland must change. And the last thing I would say, and I suppose it's a plug for Fine Gael, I believe Fine Gael has shown its greatest strengths in our history at turning points, when we had to change direction as a nation, in establishing the state, when we had to create an independent civil service, an unarmed Gardaí, in establishing the Republic, that we were willing to look beyond the arguments about the nature of independence to how we could build a united Europe, and that was Costello's ambition. In introducing the Just Society, which broadened the debate about what was possible to achieve at a time when there was very narrow thinking. In recognising the ambitions of the unionist population and helping to build a settlement that incorporated them. In abandoning destructive politics in the 80s and adopting the Tallaght strategy. I think Fine Gael's strength is at these tough times when real decisions have to be taken, specifics have to be faced up to and acted upon. And I think Fine Gael, we are at a similar turning point again in our history. And if there's one thing that we can learn from the founders, which is the topic of our discussion, it is the courage to have the ambition to face down those who would resist change and to make politics one that's fit for a citizens' republic.